So first, I'd like to introduce Julie. Julie is a former professor of psychology at Iowa Wesleyan University for many years. She's now retired. I'm a former local business owner in Fairfield and a former professor of statistics and business at a variety of universities, including locally at MUM. Our agenda tonight is fairly simple because we don't have a lot of time, and we kind of want to emphasize one idea. So I'm going to start by giving a little bit of an overview of the current political polarization. A lot of this, maybe a year ago, we would have been going in greater depth, but now pretty much everybody's kind of got the message, something's up. But from there, Julie, the more innovative part of the evening is when Julie talks about this as seen from the perspective of a marital therapist. And that'll be fun. And from there, we're going to go on to the role that better angels can play in reducing polarization. In other words, what do we do as based upon that observation? And it's a very simple idea. And I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to say it at the end. The simple idea is, living in our little tribal political bubbles, we're developing what is called a frozen image of the other side. And if we can deal with that, we might find that there's a way to reduce polarization. It's not an easy job, I will admit. So, let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. We know what's happened. If you just take a look at that seesaw, something's broken. Over the last 20 years, a significant amount of animosity has developed and grows and seems to be accelerating. And tonight I'm going to give a brief discussion about what it is, but we're going to look more deeply into how and why, what's going on. So, next slide. I want to do just a couple usual observations about polarization. My current favorite is what has happened to, and these are poll numbers that I've pulled together, to sort of disapproval. This is a measure of disapproval. Disapproval of intermarriage by type. And I marked from 1965 to 1995 to 2014, the latest I could get numbers. And it used to be that interracial and interfaith marriages would be shunned, between families and whatever. And interpolitical marriages were not even on the chart. But yet, come 1995, things start to change, and as the culture has changed now, and these numbers are not accurate because each of these are based upon a different question, but similar question. So as a statistician, I have to admit that this is not exactly apples to apples, but it's close. What we can say is, in this day and age, it seems that marrying someone of the opposite political party is more of a problem than marrying someone of a different faith or of a different race or ethnicity. Now to me, that's an indication that political affiliation is now the important identity-defining quality for so many people. And so the question is, all right, there's two very simple explanations for why this is going on. And I'm going to go to the next slide. The first is something that social scientists call social polarization. We are shunning those who have different views from us. You might all think in your quiet moment, oh, that person's I kind of avoid that person. Or I avoid politics when I'm around that person. Or you unfollow a bunch of people that's on Facebook. How many I see people smiling? Yes, people are doing that. That's what's called social sorting. You're actually creating your social environment to be in complete agreement with you. Now, then the next thing that happens is, you've heard these words, maybe information silos, echo chambers. What happens is that you end up living in a world where your information about what's going on, and especially about others, is filtered and framed by each group's agenda-driven media. Now, this is all very simplistic. It's because this isn't the juice of the talk. I just wanted to give you the idea that there's a lot of discussion about this going on. There's been a lot of social science research about what's happening. For me, I've coined a word, that it's a phrase, which is by participating in these information silos and just limiting yourself to friends that only agree with you and reading only what you agree with and getting information from media whose agenda agrees with yours, you're creating what I call a virtual mob mentality. Anybody that's ever been in a mob, and I have when I was younger, is like the mob quickly goes to the extreme. And any voices of moderation are shouted down and they go to the extreme. And that this is kind of what we're seeing happening, and everybody is wringing their hands, what's going on, and the longer this persists, as we have seen over the years, the more intense it gets. And when it gets more intense, it moves from just differences to dislike and anger and hatred, and they're the enemy. They need to be stopped. Okay, so next. The result of these is that we have two worlds, almost two movies, where reds have very distorted views of blues. By reds, I mean people who tend to vote Republican, conservative, libertarian, etc. And blues, well, libertarians kind of go both sides. Blues tend to vote Democrats, progressive, etc. And blues have totally distorted, very distorted views of reds because they're interpreting it according to their information they have. Now, the really ironic thing is that both think they know the other. Oh yeah, I know the other side. I know their arguments. Yes, I know that. And the truth is, neither are correct. And the really strange thing is a study I'm going to reference here because people are not pleased. The more politically active you are, the less accurate you are in being able to portray the other side. And the politically disengaged, what are called the exhausted majority, those in the middle, that's the phrase, they are in fact the most accurate in describing what's going on, but the most politically active, and you can see why. You're living, you're constantly being fed the information that is according to the agenda of your side. Now, next slide. Here's the problem. These are Democrat views of Republicans from the same study. And actually, I like that. Go back and forth. And then go to the next one. Whoops.
I went back.
Forward. Okay. These are Republicans' view of Democrats. Same study. And just look at the second one down. Hateful. 84% of Republicans think Democrats are hateful. 87% think of Democrats think Republicans are hateful. Now, there's something wrong with this picture. They both can't be right. Very likely, neither are completely right. You take a look at brainwashed, 88%, go to the other one. Oops, go the other way. It's 86%. Racist, 71%. Republicans view Democrats, go the other way. Racist, 89% of Democrats think Republicans are racist. When the three positive things that I could find, caring, reasonable, and honest, none of them got over more than a quarter, although I think the Republicans thought Democrats were carrying by 31%, which is okay. But nonetheless, this is interesting. And this is a problem. So let's go to the next slide, because this is what we end up with. And I want to talk about this for just a minute. Because there is a scary symmetry going on those graphs there. When you see, if everybody's hating everybody else, what's this about? So, this is what we've ended up with. And if you take a look at these, this little GIF thing I thought was kind of cute, I put it up there, but they're not really talking to each other. They're really talking amongst themselves. And that's why I put this word tribal signaling. What they're doing is they're denouncing the other side. They're demonizing the opponent. They're focusing on the faults and weaknesses of the other side. You've all said, look how bad they are. Look how bad, look what they did. How can you support such a person? And they're not really trying to convince the other side that they're wrong. They're really signaling to their tribe, look what a good tribe member I am. Boy, I really dumped on them. Okay? And needless to say, if you were to go to either one of these groups and try to ask, what do you think, accurately describe the other group, they're not going to come up with a very accurate description. So, problem here is, what do we do? And so we now are to the point where maybe there's some hope. Okay, so the next slide. And I wanted to do this because I just absolutely love this quote. This is Nelson Mandela, who dealt with a situation far worse than what we are dealing with. But here's what he said. He said, when we dehumanize and demonize our opponents, that means pointing the finger, we abandon the possibility of peacefully resolving our differences and seek to justify violence against them. That's right. The end result of this is, I'm not predicting violence or anything, but the end result of this is not good. So, Julie is now going to blank the screen, and she's going to give us a perspective from a marital therapist.
I do want to point out I am not a marriage therapist. I was a psychology professor, which has some similarity. Can you hear me okay? All right, this microphone is a lifesaver. What Joe's been doing has been describing for us what's going on in our country between the two main groups, that generally categorized as red and blue, and the animosity going on between them. He's described that, I think, brilliantly. What I like to do is bring it down to a more personal level, because I suspect that many of us in this room, and anyone listening somewhere else, has had and has felt the impact of that political polarization in our own lives. As Joe pointed out, there might be people that we aren't talking to anymore, or people who aren't talking to us, or other people where we've kind of walled off certain topics and we know we just don't go there because it's not going to end that good. Or our family members. We often hear in our workshops, I'm here because I can't talk to my son. I'm here because of so-and-so in my family. Is the splits in our home life. What do we do about it? The answer to that comes from an unlikely source, which is marriage therapy. And it says, someone at the end of one of our workshops once said, he felt that there's a crack of hope. I love that phrase, there's a crack of hope. And that's what I also have come to feel, that there is a way to bridge the divide between us individually, within our families, and in our nation too. Despite how bad it looks right now, there are steps that are being taken. There are people who are taking those steps. It can happen. We've been seeing it happen. What happened, how the whole workshops we're going to be describing later, which are part of an organization called Better Angels, how it came about was that there's this marriage therapist up in Minneapolis, Bill Doherty, internationally known, and he looked at the political situation, and he saw the tremendous animosity between the different groups. And he looked at that, and he said, that's the same thing that's going on between two people who come into my office who are at odds with each other, husband and wife at odds with each other. What's going on between them is just the microcosm of what's going on between the big groups in the country. To give you a picture of that, I'd like to have husband and wife come forward. And here's what you might see.
Okay. Who's starting?
I am.
Okay.
He is emotionally shut down. No matter what I do, I cannot get him to open up to me. I understand he had a really difficult mother, and so it makes sense why he's terrified of intimacy. But I just can't go on like this anymore. I need at least, not much, but at least a few crumbs of emotional intimacy and connection. And if he can't address these issues, if he can't do something about it, our relationship is doomed. There's really not much hope for us. Okay. Now, that is, I've actually heard that from people. There are 3 points I'd like you to notice from that. One is that she has an image of him. She has a story about him. In her mind, he is afraid of emotional intimacy. He's shut down. He won't talk to her. She's created an image of him, and Joe used the phrase frozen image. That comes from marriage therapy. That we create a frozen image of people, and then we start looking for evidence to support it. So every time that he might be distant, that's reinforcing my image of him as being emotionally distant. Every time he isn't responding to me the way I want him to, it reinforces my frozen image of him. So I'm locked into a frozen image. Now, everybody has images. We form images of people. In healthy relationships, we have all relationships, they're positive and negative images. In healthy relationships, we recognize when we're falling into the negative one, and we consciously move over to the positive ones. In unhealthy relationships, relationships in distress, we get locked into the negative one and keep reinforcing that. So that's one thing that happens. The second thing that happens is that the wife is usually talking to her friends and telling this story to all her friends and explaining to them how last night I tried to have this conversation and one more time he stonewalled me and so on and so forth. And the friends, what do? They support her. They sympathize with her. They're reinforcing her frozen negative image of him. And they, in the process, are also sharing that vision of him, so now they're seeing that in him. And then the third thing that happens is that no one's actually talking to him and hearing his side of it, which is just the exact same thing that Joe was pointing out politically, that we live in our own silos.
Information silos.
Information silos. It's the same kind of thing happening here. Well, tonight, we're actually going to hear what the husband has to say.
She is emotionally unstable. She flies off the handle at the least little thing. She's always asking me what I feel, but when I try to tell her, she gets angry because it's not what she wants me to feel. I just can't win with her. If she just stopped complaining, everything would be fine. Oh, you've heard that, right? If we could just have some more peace in the house instead of all the fighting, we'd be happy. She needs to get some serious help with her emotional problems if our relationship is going to survive. And my friends all agree with me.
So what's happening here is they're both
Oh yes,
pointing
we're
the
both.
finger at the other. Okay.
And that's
and let's see it.
Can you
see a
do the next slide? And then the next one. There you go. There you go.
That's
See,
what it looks
does that
like.
look like us?
That looks like us. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, this is pretty much this exact same thing. Again, Bill Doherty saw this going on in his office, and he saw the same thing going on in the public. Can we have the next slide? It looks like that. It's pretty much the same. So now we have, give you a picture of that. We've got our red and blue teams.
All right. Minute.
You have to point your
Okay.
finger.
Huh?
You start.
Okay. So I'm on the blue side. They're ignorant. They've been duped by the media.
They're ignorant. They've been duped by the media.
They're hypocrites. Just look at their leaders.
They're hypocrites. Just look at their leaders.
They're dishonest and hateful.
They're dishonest and hateful.
Their ideas will harm the country.
Their ideas will harm the country.
How can anybody support them when they did that?
How can anybody support them when they did that?
We can't allow them to spread their misinformation.
We can't allow them to spread their misinformation.
We can't let them win.
We cannot let them win.
They're the problem.
They're the problem.
They have to change. All right.
This is really fun. So, you see what's going on? The parallel. The same thing is happening here, where the two sides, the red and the blues, each have their frozen image of the other. Now, when we take it from the individual level to the group level, there's a new word that we introduce, a word you're all familiar with. It's called stereotypes. And that has a charged sound to it, and it is charged, because that's what's happening. We have a stereotype of what that other side is like, how bad they are. They have the same or corresponding stereotype of us.
They have different stereotypes.
Yeah, corresponding, yeah.
Yes.
Stereotype of us. So that's like frozen image, stereotypes of the other side. The couple just talking to their own friends and getting reinforcement for their views, expanding that same view. And the same thing over here, as Joe talked about, the information silos, the social isolation that keeps reinforcing and expanding the views. And who's talking to the other side? The wife and her friends, not talking to him to find out his side of the story. She's spreading it all over town and all her friends are believing it, not checking it out. And the same thing over here. We keep staying in our same political group. Maybe we think we understand the other side, but if you asked them, if we told them what we thought, they would say, no, you don't get us at all. So you see the same dynamic happening, the micro level, the macro level. Now, so when this is happening, and Joe alluded to this, but I just want to say it a little bit more, is that take the couple, now add severe financial problems, doesn't have to be severe, financial problems, add a difficult problem child, add any problem you want. How likely is it that they can actually have a cooperative conversation to resolve their problems? Similarly, in our country, we've got all kinds of problems. We have immigration, gun control, abortion, all kinds of issues.
Climate
change, all kinds of issues. And we're not able to reach any consensus to move forward on them. We're stuck with them because of what's going on, the animosity that's going on. So the real core problem, not that those aren't all important problems, but underneath, before we can resolve any of those problems, we have to get on the same side. We have to start breaking through our frozen images of each other and start to see the other more accurately, and with a sense of finding what do we have in common, where is the goodwill, so we can begin to actually address our problems, our issues in an effective way. And this is where Bill Doherty had the brilliant insight that the exact same tools he uses with couples to help them go from there to being able to connect can also work on the group level. So let's look at what happens when a couple comes together. First thing, or not first thing, but an important part of it is helping to make them recognize the stories they're telling about the other, the frozen images they have about the other. So you can start breaking out of that. Also, learning how to listen. Now, we think we listen, and lots of us have taken courses in active listening or this thing or that thing. But when you're talking to someone who's saying something that is counter to what you think, or husband and a wife, partners, whoever, mother, child, whoever, they're saying something that's hitting against you. The tendency as you're listening is what I call rebuttal listening. You're listening to keep track of what are they saying so that I know how to counter them, so I know how to get back at them. I'm not listening to understand. I have a different agenda going on. So it's really important, and it's a real skill to be learned, how to listen so that I can understand what you're saying. Then learning how to express ourselves. There's a wonderful title of a book for parents about how to talk so your children will listen. Also, how to listen so your children will talk. But how to talk so that you're not triggering somebody, so that you're not getting them defensive, so they think they have to uphold their own views. But how to talk in a way that someone, even though they're opposed to what you have to say, they're going to be receptive to what you have to say. That's another important skill. And then the last main one is learning how to find common ground, getting the practice of looking for common ground and establishing goodwill. These are the tools that are used, some of the tools, in marriage therapy. These are the skills that couples are taught. And this is also exactly what happens in the Better Angels workshops. And so that leads us to the next part of our presentation.
Are there any more slides?
Yes.
There's just a couple slides.
I can.
So, Bill Doherty from the University of Minnesota, he's the founder. He is the originator of what we call the red-blue workshops. So, next slide. This thing. The red-blue workshop is a 3-hour get-together, usually in this room. We balance 7 reds and 7 blues, and we sit around a table, and the first thing we do, well, we have two goals for that first meeting, and that is to break down the negative frozen images of the other side and establish goodwill. We're not really talking much. We're just finding out that we're human beings. And generally the experience is people realize, oh, wait, we can actually be friendly here. It's okay. We may differ on things, but it's okay. We actually call our workshop Friends with Differences. But that's the first workshop. Then the next workshop that follows it, which is also 3 hours, same 7 people, both sides. They've already established goodwill. They learn how to listen. There's actually a technique. How do you listen to somebody to make them feel you're hearing them? And then how to speak across the political divide. And once that starts, people can then say, well, what do we have in common here? Where do we disagree? Where do we agree? And those are the 2 workshops that we offer and have offered over the last year and some. We've done it 10 different times in Fairfield. We're approaching 1% of the city that have gone through it. But because many of you may not go, I'm going to give you a couple observations. So the next thing. First thing that generally the most often mentioned observation from the workshops is people realize the incentive that there is out there to keep us divided. Whether that's through our political leaders, through the media, through social media, we're guided into dislike and hatred of the other side. It's just, it works. Unfortunately, it's a very powerful technique. Next one. The next thing, when people actually talk about real issues, they realize we're far less divided than we've been led to believe. We may have different opinions here, but it's not life and death. We're not black and white a lot of times. Okay, I'm going to say more about that next one, because I realize I'm running into a time issue. Most people realize that most issues are nuanced, not black and white. And the important part of that is that different political interests have important contributions to make. It's not truth all on one side or the other. And so participants are encouraged to seek and understand other perspectives. So that gets to 3 Better Angels principles that I want to mention. When we have our meetings, the first thing we do is we establish some ground rules. Number 1, we treat those with different opinions with respect. Number 2, we seek to understand the other side's point of view, even if you don't agree with it. And number 3, we engage the best arguments of the other side. We don't point out the worst. We can do that all day. Look what you did. Look what you did. Look what you did. Oh, but you did that. But if you have to engage the best argument of their side, that's a challenge. And then a conversation can ensue. Now, I don't want to mean to imply that on any particular issue, both sides have equally valid arguments. It's not the case. We are just saying both sides have valid perspectives that should be listened to. And more importantly, the problems will not be resolved without communication. So you got to listen. Okay? Just as with the couple. You may think it's all her problem. But if you want to be able to deal with the kids, you're going to have to listen. And you're going to have to work through your issues. Now, it's important to remind, another point I want to make is that we're not asking individuals to become moderates. We say, stick with your views. If you hear something that changes it, fine, but you stick with your views. What we're asking you to drop is the hate and disdain of the other side. Just because somebody thinks healthcare should be delivered in a different way than you do, you don't have to hate them for it. They might actually have a good point of view. Maybe it's amalgam of the 2 point of view that might be the best thing that could happen. So anyway, that's why we call our workshops Friends with Differences. And now the last point here is I know many people in here are probably secretly thinking, and it's a rare person that isn't, so I will already absolve you if you're thinking this. Yeah, okay, this is all well and good, except that the other side really is bad. And they really are the problem. Now this is sort of like the husband or wife that reluctantly agrees to go to marriage therapy, but they're thinking, okay, I'll go, but it's her problem, and she's got to change, okay? Now, problem is, what happens when both sides think the same thing? As is usually the case, whether in couples or in this situation of our political differences. And when both sides are unwilling to recognize their role in the problems, if you have that thought, well, yeah, but they're really bad. That's your frozen image. And that's the problem. And you have to learn to recognize you're participating in the problem by having that. So, anyway, I'm berating you. I'm sorry. I apologize. Let's do something real nice. Next one. This is another reason to absolutely love Abraham Lincoln. In 1861, when he was facing a civil war, where the country was going to end up killing 600,000 people on both, total, both sides, and maiming and ruining people for generations. This was his inaugural address. He said, "We are not enemies, but friends." He says, "We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained," he's not going to wax lyrical, "it may not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will yet swell the chorus of the union when again touched by the better angels of our nature." He was already thinking of the end of the Civil War, that what had to happen. And he was saying, we need to find our better angels to be able to pull this out. So, you might be wondering, Red Blue Workshops, this is what we do. And guess what? They're free. We do this as a community service. Everything we do, there's no money in Better Angels. I mean, if you join you can join Better Angels. It costs $10 a year if you want to support the national organization. But you can register online, or you can sign up in the back. That is our talk. Next slide, just for a second. Yeah, now isn't that a cute slide? But go to the prior one.
Hold on.
Can you do that? Yeah. So just so up here, this is we would like to see people come. So if you want to sign up, you're here, and thank you very much for listening.